First hole cut. And what you may be able to see from there, and if not I'll bring you around a bit, is that the inner bumper is rather closer than I thought it would be, although it's got a bit of movement in it. If I put some shims in to hold it tight to the bumper mounts, it won't be quite so much in the way. And it doesn't actually foul at the moment. I think that the lights are going to go so that they're flush with this side. Can't get a hand in, unfortunately, can I? So I want the lights to go to about there, so that they're flush on this side, and there's just a little bit of fill around there. So I'm going to put some paper in now, take a little template, and then I can take that home and sketch something up in CAD. Back at home, and after a couple of missteps, I've worked out how to translate my paper template accurately into CAD using Fusion 360 and some very old school tools: pen, paper, set square and a rubber for all my mistakes. So what I've done is I've cut my template effectively into half, so done half the circumference, and just taken a few reference points around this at the heights at which it gets to, from here, which will be the top of the light, to here, which is the top of the bucket. And you can see it's 64 millimeters at the top, drops 54, 30 in the middle, 8. So these are, it's halfway, quarter each side. And then I've taken these measurements and translated them into a sketch on Fusion 360, which I'll show you now. So this isn't a Fusion 360 tutorial, so I won't try to teach you everything here, but I've just drawn a basic bucket shape. I've added in some holes for the cable and for the threaded mounting points on the bottom of the light. And then what I've done is I've taken my sketch, my paper sketch, and drawn out a box, a sketch box, the size of the width rather of half the circumference of my lighting tube, my light bucket, and then I've just plotted a fit point spline along those points that I measured. Then what I've done is I've done an offset and turned it into a box so that I can then emboss it onto the tube that I've created, onto the pipe that I've created. So if I do, in this case it's create, emboss, select my profile, select the face on which I want to emboss it, and you can see that it puts that very nicely around there, and unlike my previous attempts, it keeps the flange flat. Now obviously we don't want the flange to be right at the level of the top of the light. We want to offset it slightly so that the part of the tube protrudes through the fiberglass, and then we can just smooth it in with some filler. So we can just offset that by -5 millimeters, and then we can then just sort of cut the tube off using an offset from here and a little bit of trickery. So that gets us the profile that we measured transferred perfectly to here. And rather than do that again, I'll just fast forward you through my timeline where I've added that on one side. And then I've drawn, and this was slightly trickier than I expected actually. I've taken an offset from here and then just tweaked it slightly so that I get basically an even 5mm offset all the way down through there, and then just used an extrude to cut it off. That obviously only gives me the embossing of my flange on one side, and this is an excuse to say flange a lot more, so I just basically repeated the process on the other side, which leaves me with a flange all the way around. And yeah, that's how I've done it. Ultimately, I did do it completely wrong the first time around, and that resulted in the first trial print that I'll show you now. So this was my first trial print. Took about 20 hours. It's 3.6mm thick. It's printed in PETG, clear PETG, or sort of clear, because that just happens to be what I had on the printer at the time. It doesn't really matter since it's all going to be painted. And there's a number of problems with this. Number one is you can probably see there's a sort of sine wave type shape to the curve. Now I thought initially that I'd done this right because the curve of the car in that dimension as well as in this dimension would produce that sort of sine wave shape. The more I looked at it and the more I looked back at my video, I realised that there's nowhere near enough curve in this dimension to produce that sort of sine wave shape. So I'd done something wrong in the transfer process. And what I'd done was basically done it proportionally. I transferred my measurements proportionally from here onto the pipe. So I'd shrunk them down onto the pipe rather than having them transferred and embossed for the full half circumference. So that resulted in this weird sort of sine shape, because effectively the measurements of this long flat bit here are being transferred back up here, if that makes any sense. Anyway, that was one of the problems. The second one is that it's too deep. I'm not sure how, but I got the measurements slightly wrong. So the light's sitting quite recessed into the bucket and I want it pretty much flush. And the third problem is that the light's going to sit this way, and this is really, really nerdy. And you can see just about that the E marks are now horizontal, and I really want the E marks vertical because that just looks like how they should be. I've rotated everything so that the next print, the light should sit the right way up. It should be totally flush with the edge of the bucket, and the curve should be right to fit the back of the car, I hope. So what I'll do is I'll print another one and take it into the garage tomorrow and give it a test, assuming it's finished. There we go, first test fit. It's not fully in. I need to actually open up the hole slightly so that the lip I put on the thing fits. But I mean, A, it looks fantastic. B, it's probably needs a bit of fettling. That's actually not quite in because there's not actually enough space for the things to locate. But if I pull the actual light out, which I'll see if I can do with one hand. Come on, come on. No, right, back in a sec. There we go. So yeah, I don't know if this is obvious, but what I hadn't accounted for, if you look at the body this way, is the light buckets aren't quite on the centre line, they're above it. And so there is a slope this way rather than an even slope either side, which means that the back of the bucket might be canted back slightly once it's mounted. So I might just redesign it to put a sort of, I don't know, maybe 5 degree. Not sure how to measure it really. I don't have if I got it perfectly fitted and then measured the angle, that might be the way to do it. Or I guess, yeah, I might print a variant that's got a bit sort of an angle on the curve like that to take account of this fact. But overall, really happy. I think those are going to work brilliantly. And yeah, all good. So I'll stop this video there. Clearly still a lot to do in order to get those rear lights in, but getting closer. I can see the end in sight. So I need to cut more holes, I need to print more buckets, I need to print that variant, and then I need to crack on with the number plate mount. And I've got some parts at home now ready for going into CAD and modelling up now. Need to get some bits of metal bent, various other bits, but I'll show you all that on a future episode. Anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this, catch you on the next one. Please do like and subscribe, bye bye.